What happens when a fairy tale wedding turns into a public nightmare? Jennifer Parker was living that dream. An accomplished architect, pregnant with her first child, and about to marry Mark Ashford, the handsome heir to a billion-dollar fortune. The dress was perfect. The venue was a palace, but a cold feeling she couldn't shake told her something was terribly wrong. She was right. Because as she walked down the aisle, a woman stepped out from the crowd. A beautiful, furious woman Jennifer had never seen before. And in front of everyone, with the groom's billionaire father, watching in chilling silence, the woman's hand cracked across Jennifer's face, a slap that would shatter everything. This isn't just a story about a cheating groom. This is a story about secrets, lies, and a powerful father's cruelest test. Jennifer Parker took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of 1,000 white roses and lilies filling her lungs. The air in the bridal suite of the Ashford estate was thick with it, a sweet, almost suffocating perfume that mirrored her feelings exactly. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The dress, a custom Vera Wang creation of cascading silk and intricate lace, felt less like a gown and more like beautiful, expensive armor. Her reflection in the ornate floor-to-ceiling mirror showed a woman who should be ecstatic. Her soft brown hair was swept into an elegant chignon. Her makeup was flawless, and the gentle swell of her 4-month pregnancy was just visible beneath the gown's empire waistline. She was marrying Mark Ashford, and yet an icy dread had been coiling in her stomach for weeks. She met Mark 2 years ago, not at a gala or a charity auction, but at a construction site. Jennifer was the lead architect on a new sustainable skyscraper project, and Mark, trying to prove his worth outside the family business, was a junior project manager. He was charming, genuinely funny, and seemed utterly unfazed by her ambition. He'd shown up with 2 coffees on a rainy Tuesday, and their love story felt real, grounded, built on shared blueprints and late-night talks, not trust funds. The problems began when he introduced her to his father. Robert Ashford was not a man. He was an institution, a titan of industry with a portfolio spanning from technology to global shipping. He had a presence that sucked the air out of any room he entered. He had looked at Jennifer not as his son's partner, but as a balance sheet. He assessed her pedigree or lack thereof. Her education impressive, but not from the right schools, and her career a respectable profession, but not an inheritance. She could feel him deeming her a liability. An architect, he had said during their first dinner, the words clipped and sterile. A noble pursuit, for those who must build things with their hands. The insult was subtle, a silken dagger slid between her ribs. He saw her as the help. Mark, bless him, had tried. Dad, Jennifer is one of the most respected young architects in the country. She's brilliant. Robert had only smiled, a reptilian curl of the lips that didn't reach his cold grey eyes. Of course, my son has eclectic tastes. From then on, Jennifer felt like an outsider on a permanent audition. Every dinner was a test, every conversation a cross-examination. Robert Ashford's disapproval was a constant low-frequency hum beneath the surface of her relationship with Mark. When she and Mark announced their engagement, followed shortly by the news of her pregnancy, Robert's congratulations were delivered with the warmth of a foreclosure notice. An heir, he'd stated, looking past Jennifer directly at his son. The Ashford line must continue. We will ensure the child has everything it needs. He spoke of her baby as if it were a corporate asset, another entry in the family ledger. Now, on her wedding day, that feeling of being an unwelcome acquisition was overwhelming. Her own family, a loving, middle-class clan from Ohio, seemed utterly lost in the sea of opulence. Her father, a retired history teacher, kept marveling at the 18th century tapestries, while her mother fretted about spilling something on the Persian rugs. They were good, honest people, and Jennifer could see the discomfort in their eyes, the feeling of being out of their depth. They were here for her, but they didn't belong in this world, and a terrifying part of her knew that she didn't either. "You look beautiful, Jenny," her best friend and maid of honor, Chloe, said, coming to stand beside her. Chloe, a sharp-witted journalist who never minced words, had been skeptical of the Ashfords from day one. "I feel like I'm about to be sworn into a royal family that hates me," Jennifer whispered, her voice trembling lightly. Chloe squeezed her shoulder. "Hey, you're not marrying the family. You're marrying Mark. He loves you. That's the only thing that matters." But did it? Lately, Mark had been distant. He was stressed, he'd said, trying to manage his father's expectations for the wedding. But it felt like more than that. There were hushed phone calls he would end abruptly when she entered the room, and a haunted, distracted look in his eyes that hadn't been there before. When she'd tried to talk to him about it, he'd just kissed her forehead and said, "It's just my father, Jen. He's being his usual controlling self. After we're married, it'll all be different. I promise." A soft knock echoed through the suite. A footman in a crisp uniform entered. "Madam, it is time." Jennifer's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment she was supposed to feel nothing but joy. She took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was beautiful, successful, and pregnant with the child of the man she loved. So why did she look so much like a prisoner walking to her own execution? Chloe handed her the bouquet of white peonies. Her hands were shaking so badly, she was afraid she might drop them. As she walked toward the grand staircase that would lead her down to the garden, where 300 of the world's most powerful people were waiting, she caught a glimpse of Robert Ashford standing in the main hall below. He was looking up at her, his face an unreadable mask of granite. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching, waiting. And in that moment, the coil of dread in her stomach tightened into a knot of pure terror. She felt with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she wasn't walking toward a new beginning. She was walking into a trap. The music began a string quartet, playing a classical piece that was probably priceless, but felt generic and hollow to Jennifer. The great oak doors to the garden swung open, revealing a scene of impossible splendor. A white carpet stretched down a long aisle, flanked by towering arrangements of flowers, leading to a floral arch under which Mark stood, looking impossibly handsome in his Tom Ford tuxedo. The guests, a glittering assembly of CEOs, politicians, and socialites, turned in their seats, their faces a blur of polite smiles. Jennifer's father linked his arm through hers, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "You'll be all right, sweetheart," he murmured, though she could hear the tremor in his own voice. Her eyes found Mark's. He offered her a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were filled with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. Was it nervousness or was it fear? He looked pale beneath his tan, his posture rigid. Beside him, his father, Robert Ashford, stood as his best man. It was an odd choice, one Robert had insisted upon, claiming it was a family tradition. He wasn't looking at his son. His gaze was fixed laser-like on Jennifer as she began her slow procession down the aisle. Each step felt like wading through molasses. The polite smiles of the guests felt like leers. The opulent flowers seemed to mock her with their silent, perfect beauty. Her focus narrowed to Mark, a life raft in a hostile sea. Just get to him, she told herself. Once I'm with him, everything will be okay. She was halfway down the aisle when the first ripple of disturbance occurred. A murmur started in the back rows, a sibilant whisper that grew into a low buzz of confusion. Heads began to turn, not toward Jennifer, but toward the side of the aisle. Jennifer's steps faltered. Her father's grip on her arm tightened, and then she saw her. A woman stepped out from between two massive floral urns, moving with a predatory grace. She was stunning in a way that was both intimidating and infuriating, tall with a cascade of raven-black hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a figure poured into a blood-red dress that was scandalously inappropriate for a wedding. She looked directly at Jennifer, her expression a cocktail of contempt and triumph. Jennifer had never seen this woman before in her life. She glanced at Mark, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. His eyes were wide with what could only be described as pure, unadulterated panic. He knew her. Oh God, he knew her. The woman stopped directly in Jennifer's path, blocking the aisle. The string quartet, sensing the shift in mood, faltered, the music dying in a discordant squeak. A heavy, shocked silence fell over the 300 guests. "Going somewhere?" the woman asked, her voice low, but carrying with lethal clarity in the stillness. Her eyes raked over Jennifer's gown, lingering for a moment on the subtle curve of her belly, with a sneer. Jennifer was too stunned to speak. Her father stepped forward protectively. "Excuse me, miss. I think you're in the— I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," the woman snapped, never taking her eyes off Jennifer. She then looked past her toward the altar. "Aren't I Mark?" Mark looked like he was about to be sick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The woman's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Don't you have anything to say? You can't just block my number and pretend I don't exist. That's not how this works." Jennifer's mind was spinning. Block her number. The hushed phone calls, the distracted silences, it all crashed down on her with the force of a physical blow. This was his secret. This woman was his secret. Who are you?" Jennifer finally managed to whisper the words, feeling like shards of glass in her throat. The woman laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Who am I? My name is Victoria Stratton, and I'm the woman he was with last week. And the week before that, and the week before that, I'm the woman he tells he loves when he's not playing house with his pregnant little project." The term "little project" hit Jennifer with surgical precision. It was what Robert Ashford had called her work, once a condescending dismissal of her career. The venom in Victoria's voice felt rehearsed, targeted. Jennifer's gaze darted from the fury in Victoria's face to the absolute terror in Mark's, and then instinctively to Robert Ashford. The billionaire hadn't moved a muscle. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rushing to control the situation. He was simply watching his expression, cold, clinical, like a scientist observing a chemical reaction he had set in motion. And in that horrifying moment of clarity, Jennifer understood. He knew. He had known all along. This wasn't a random interruption. This was an execution. "Mark!" Jennifer's voice was a plea. A desperate final appeal for the man she thought she loved, to say something, to deny it, to fix it. Mark just stood there, paralyzed by a mixture of cowardice and shock, his eyes darting between Jennifer Victoria and his father. Victoria saw his weakness and pounced. "He's not going to defend you," she spat at Jennifer. "Why would he? You're a temporary arrangement, a convenient incubator for the Ashford heir. Did you really think this was about love?" She took another step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, poison-laced whisper. He doesn't love you. He loves the idea of defying his father. But he's too weak to ever actually do it. And I'm not the only one who knows it." She then did something that defied all comprehension. She looked Jennifer dead in the eye, her face a mask of incandescent rage, and said, "And here's another thing you should know." Then, with a swift, vicious movement, Victoria Stratton raised her hand. The sound of her palm cracking against Jennifer's cheek echoed through the silent garden like a gunshot. Jennifer's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow, a stunned, searing pain erupting on her skin. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her father lurched forward with a cry of outrage, but it was too late. The slap wasn't just a physical assault. It was a branding, a public declaration of her humiliation. Jennifer stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and brimming with tears. Through the haze of pain and disbelief, her gaze found Robert Ashford again. He was still there, still watching. And now, for the first time, an emotion flickered across his face. It was not pity. It was not horror. It was a look of profound, chilling satisfaction. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a long, suspended moment after the slap, the only sound was the frantic beating of Jennifer's own heart in her ears. The stinging on her cheek was a hot, spreading stain of shame. She could feel 300 pairs of eyes on her, not with sympathy but with a morbid, hungry curiosity. She was no longer a bride. She was a spectacle. Her father was the first to react, his face purple with rage. "Get away from my daughter!" he roared, moving to put himself between Jennifer and Victoria. Victoria didn't even flinch. She simply held her ground, her chest heaving, her eyes still blazing with a righteous fury that Jennifer couldn't comprehend. It was the look of a woman who believed she was the one who had been wronged. But Jennifer's eyes weren't on Victoria. They were locked on Mark. He stood frozen at the altar, a statue carved from indecision. He looked at her, his mouth agape, his face a canvas of pathetic helplessness. He should have been the first to move, the first to shield her, the first to roar in her defense. He should have crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and stood by her side. But he didn't. He just stood there, trapped in the headlights of a disaster he had created. The silence that followed the initial gasps was more damning than any accusation. It was a vacuum filled only by the weight of unspoken judgments. In that silence, Mark's inaction was a confession. It was an admission of guilt, of weakness, of betrayal. Every second that he remained rooted to his spot next to his father was another nail in the coffin of their relationship. Then the second shoe dropped, and it was a bombshell. Victoria, seemingly emboldened by the lack of resistance, took a step back and placed a hand protectively over her own flat stomach. "You think your baby makes you special?" She sneered at Jennifer, her voice dripping with scorn. "You think that little bump gives you a claim? Well, I have news for you and for everyone." She turned her head, projecting her voice to the horrified guests. "I'm pregnant too. With Mark's baby." A collective audible gasp swept through the crowd. This time a wave of shock and scandal. This was no longer just an affair. It was a dynasty-level crisis. 2 women, both claiming to be pregnant by the Ashford heir. Jennifer felt the ground give way beneath her. The strength drained from her legs, and her vision swam. The word pregnant echoed in her mind, a cruel, mocking refrain. It couldn't be true. It was a lie. It had to be. She looked at Mark, her eyes begging him, pleading with him to refute it. Mark finally broke his paralysis. He took a hesitant step forward, his hands raised in a useless, placating gesture. "Victoria, don't. Please. This isn't the time or the place." "Isn't it?" she shrieked, her composure cracking, to reveal a raw, desperate pain beneath the anger. "When is the right time, Mark? When you're on your honeymoon? When your child with her is born? You told me you would handle this. You told me you loved me. You swore you were going to leave her." Every word was a fresh stab to Jennifer's heart. She felt dizzy, nauseous. Her protective hand went to her own stomach, a desperate maternal instinct to shield her unborn child from the toxicity that had just poisoned their world. Chloe, her face a mask of fury, finally broke through the paralysis that had gripped the wedding party. She rushed to Jennifer's side, throwing a protective arm around her. "That's enough," she yelled at Victoria. "Get the hell out of here." But the real power was not with the hysterical mistress or the supportive friend. It was at the altar. Robert Ashford finally moved. He didn't rush forward. He didn't raise his voice. He simply took one deliberate step toward his son and placed a calm, firm hand on his shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was a gesture of control. An anchor reminding Mark where his true allegiance lay. Robert's voice, when it came, was quiet, but carried the effortless authority of a man used to commanding boardrooms and bending governments to his will. "Security," he said, not shouting, but with a tone that brooked no argument. Two large men in dark suits, previously inconspicuous, materialized and began to move purposefully toward Victoria. Victoria saw them coming and seemed to deflate slightly, a flicker of fear in her eyes. But she had one last piece of venom to spit. She looked directly at Robert Ashford. "You can't get rid of me, Robert," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You know it. This is your grandchild, too." Robert's expression didn't change. He gave a minuscule, almost imperceptible nod to the security guards. They reached Victoria and took her by the arms. She didn't struggle violently, but allowed herself to be escorted away, casting one last look of pure hatred back at Jennifer. The immediate threat was gone, but the devastation remained. The garden was a wasteland of shattered dreams and public humiliation. The guests were whispering furiously, their phones no doubt already buzzing with the biggest high society scandal of the decade. Jennifer, leaning heavily on Chloe, finally looked at Mark again. His father still had a hand on his shoulder, a human leash. The son looked at the bride, his eyes full of a pathetic apology. "Jen, I can explain." But what was there to explain? The truth was laid bare on the white aisle runner, as ugly and undeniable as a bloodstain. And as Jennifer looked at the man she was about to marry, she didn't see the charming, funny partner from the construction site. She saw a weak, terrified boy, utterly owned by the cold, silent man, standing beside him. The love she had felt for him curdled into a nauseating mix of pity and disgust. The world started to spin faster. Black spots danced in her vision. The stress, the shock, the public humiliation, it was too much. A sharp, cramping pain shot through her abdomen, a terrifying physical manifestation of her emotional agony. I don't feel well," she gasped, her hand tightening on Chloe's arm. Her legs gave out completely, and as she collapsed, the last thing she saw before the world went black was Robert Ashford's face. He was still watching her, his expression utterly unmoved, as if he were merely observing the final successful stage of a meticulously planned demolition. Jennifer awoke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and the soft rhythmic beep of a machine. For a blissful second, she thought the wedding had been a nightmare. But the dull throb on her cheek and the heavy, leaden feeling in her heart told her it was all horrifyingly real. She was in a bed, not in her bridal suite, but in a quiet, private room. The opulent Vera Wang gown was gone, replaced by a simple, soft cotton nightgown. Chloe was sitting in a chair by the bed, her face etched with worry. "Hey," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Welcome back." "The baby," Jennifer whispered, her first conscious thought a surge of panic. "Is the baby okay?" "The baby's fine," Chloe said immediately, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "You have a strong little fighter in there. The doctor said you collapsed from acute stress and dehydration. They want to keep you for observation, but you're both stable. You just gave us all a massive scare." Relief washed over Jennifer so intensely it left her weak. The baby was safe. For now, that was all that mattered. The memory of the cramping pain returned, a phantom echo of the terror she had felt. She had been so scared of losing the one pure thing in this entire mess. "Where are we?" she asked, looking around the well-appointed room. It was clearly a hospital, but a luxurious one. "The Ashford wing of St. Jude's Medical Center," Chloe said with a wry, bitter twist of her lips. "Of course. He owns the damn place. Makes it easier to control the narrative." He, Jennifer knew, meant Robert. "Where's Mark?" Chloe hesitated, her expression darkening. "He tried to come in. I wouldn't let him. Neither would your father. He's pacing in the hallway like a lost puppy. A lost, spineless, cheating puppy." Jennifer closed her eyes, a fresh wave of pain, emotional, not physical, washing over her. Mark, his paralysis at the altar, his father's hand on his shoulder. Victoria's screaming accusations. "I'm pregnant too." "Is it true?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely audible. "Is she?" "We don't know," Chloe admitted. "But honestly, Jenny, at this point, does it matter? True or not, what Mark did? What he allowed to happen to you? That's the part that's unforgivable." Jennifer knew she was right. The potential second baby was just a symptom of the disease. The disease was Mark's weakness and his family's toxicity. A quiet knock on the door made them both look up. It wasn't a nurse. It was Robert Ashford, standing in the doorway, in his perfectly tailored suit, looking as immaculate and unruffled as if he'd just come from a board meeting. There was no trace of concern on his face, only a quiet, unnerving calm. Chloe shot to her feet. "You are not welcome here," she said, her voice low and fierce. Robert ignored her completely, his grey eyes fixed on Jennifer. "I need a moment alone with Jennifer," he stated, not asked. "Not a chance in hell," Chloe shot back. "Chloe, it's okay," Jennifer said, her own voice surprising her with its steadiness. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, simmering anger. She wanted to hear what this monster had to say. She needed to look him in the eye. "Can you give us 5 minutes?" Chloe looked like she wanted to argue, but she saw the new hard glint in Jennifer's eyes and reluctantly nodded. "I'll be right outside the door. You scream and I'm coming in with a chair." She shot one last venomous glare at Robert before exiting and closing the door behind her. The silence in the room was heavy, charged. Robert Ashford walked to the foot of the bed, his hands clasped behind his back. He surveyed her with the dispassionate air of someone examining a damaged asset. "I trust the care is satisfactory." He began, his tone polite and utterly devoid of warmth. "Cut the crap, Robert," Jennifer said, her voice raw. Did you know she was going to be there?" He didn't flinch or deny it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Victoria Stratton is the daughter of a long-time business associate, a very passionate and volatile young woman. I was aware that she was distraught over Mark's decision to marry you. I could not, however, predict the specifics of her public display. It was a masterclass in evasion. He admitted knowledge without admitting culpability. You wanted this to happen. Jennifer stated the realization hitting her with absolute certainty. You watched that woman sap your son's pregnant fiancée, and you did nothing. You enjoyed it. Enjoyment is an irrelevant emotion, he replied coolly. What I observed was the logical outcome of a poor decision. I warned my son that a union with you would bring complications. You are not equipped for our world, Jennifer. Your background, your emotional constitution, it's all wrong. Today was merely a public demonstration of that fact. The sheer arrogance, the cold-blooded cruelty of his words stole her breath. He was blaming her for being assaulted. So what now? She asked, her hands curling into fists under the blanket. You've successfully humiliated me. You've broken up the wedding. What's the next item on your agenda? He walked over to the bedside table and placed a sleek, dark leather portfolio on it. He opened it. Inside was a single document and a pen. This is a severance agreement, he said, his voice flat. It offers you a settlement of $10 million. It also provides a fully furnished home in any city of your choosing in the United States, excluding New York, and a monthly stipend for the child's care that is, shall we say, extraordinarily generous. The funds will be placed in a trust managed by my people. Jennifer stared at the papers, then back at his face. A severance agreement. I'm not one of your employees. Aren't you? He countered smoothly. You were for a time contracted to provide an heir. The contract is now terminated, but I am a man who honors his financial obligations. The $10 million is for your silence and your immediate and permanent departure from my son's life. You will sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, and you will relocate within 30 days. The child, of course, will carry the Ashford name. My lawyers will arrange visitation schedules when it is of an appropriate age. He was buying her off. He was buying her baby. He was trying to erase her to pay for her silence and her pain as if she were a line item in his budget. The insult was so profound, so dehumanizing, that a strange, wild calm descended upon Jennifer. The fear was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a core of pure, unadulterated rage. She slowly pushed herself up her eyes, never leaving his. You think you can buy my child? You think you can put a price on what happened today? I am a practical man, Robert said. Everything has a price. This is a very generous offer. It will allow you to live a life of comfort and security, free from the pressures you are so clearly unable to handle. It is in fact the best possible outcome for you. Jennifer looked at the pen lying next to the contract. She thought of Mark's weakness, of Victoria's screaming, of the slap, of the public shame. And she thought of the tiny, resilient life inside her. This child would not be raised in the shadow of this man. This child would not be another asset for Robert Ashford to control. With a sudden, swift movement, she reached out, grabbed the portfolio, and flung it across the room. The papers scattered across the floor. "Get out!" she said, her voice shaking with fury. "Get out of my room!" Robert Ashford watched the papers flutter to the ground, his expression unchanged. He seemed neither surprised nor angered by her outburst. He simply gave a small, almost pitying sigh. "You are being emotional," he said, turning to leave. "A regrettable but predictable feminine trait. The offer stands for 24 hours. After that, I will be forced to assume you prefer a more adversarial resolution." And I assure you, Jennifer, you do not want me as an adversary. You have no idea what you would be up against." He closed the door behind him, leaving Jennifer alone in the suffocating silence, the unsigned contract lying on the floor like a declaration of war. He was right about one thing. She had no idea what she was up against. But in that moment, she also knew with a fire she didn't know she possessed that he had no idea what he had just unleashed in her. The 24 hours of Robert Ashford's ultimatum passed in a blur of doctor's tears and a simmering, clarifying rage. Jennifer's parents arrived, their faces a mixture of fury and helplessness. Her father, a man who believed in decency and honor, could barely speak about Robert Ashford without his voice trembling. Her mother just held her, stroking her hair and whispering reassurances that they would figure everything out. Mark had tried to get into the room a dozen more times. He sent flowers, a massive, tasteless bouquet of roses that Jennifer had a nurse throw out immediately. He sent text messages, a pathetic torrent of "I'm so sorry," "Please let me explain," and "It's not what you think." Each message was a testament to his own cowardice. He couldn't even face her. He was hiding behind a screen, just as he had hidden behind his father at the altar. Jennifer refused to see him. She refused to speak to him. There was nothing to say. She had seen everything she needed to see in his frozen inaction. The man she thought she loved didn't exist. He was a phantom, a charming facade built on a foundation of fear. On the second day, the doctor discharged her with strict instructions for bed rest and zero stress. A laughable prescription under the circumstances. Chloe and her parents helped her pack her few things. There was no question of returning to the lavish apartment she had shared with Mark. It was his, a gilded cage owned by his father. Instead, Chloe took her back to her own small, cluttered but safe apartment in Brooklyn. Stepping into Chloe's apartment was like coming up for air after nearly drowning. It was real. There were stacks of books, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table, and the smell of brewing coffee. There was no cold marble, no intimidating art, no sense of being constantly watched and judged. "The first thing we need to do," Chloe said, setting down Jennifer's bag, "is get you a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. Someone who eats men like Robert Ashford for breakfast." Jennifer sank onto the sofa, the exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight. A lawyer for what, Chloe? To sue them for? What, being horrible people? For public humiliation, he'd bury me in legal fees. He owns half the judges in New York. He said it himself, I don't want him as an adversary. "So what's the alternative?" Chloe demanded, kneeling in front of her. "You just take it. You let him win. You let him dictate the terms for your child's life." "No, Jenny. That's not you. You're a fighter. You're the woman who went head-to-head with a misogynistic developer and won." Jennifer looked down at her hands. Chloe was right. She wasn't a victim. She was an architect. She built things. She designed systems. She understood structure, stress points, and foundations. Robert Ashford thought he had built an impenetrable fortress. But every fortress had a weakness. "You're right," Jennifer said slowly, a new resolve hardening in her voice. "Fighting him in a courtroom is a losing game. He controls that world, but he doesn't control everything. I need to think. I need to build a new plan." For the next few days, Jennifer did what she did best. She analyzed the problem from every angle. She didn't want Robert's money. The $10 million offer was an insult, a way to quantify her silence and pain. What she wanted was something he valued more than money control. She wanted to take it away from him. She wanted to ensure that he would have no power over her or her child, ever. The key, she realized, was Mark. Robert's entire plan hinged on his son's obedience. He believed Mark was weak enough to eventually fall in line, marry the right woman, presumably Victoria, if her pregnancy was real, and continue the dynasty. Robert had orchestrated the wedding disaster to sever the tie between Jennifer and Mark, confident his son would crawl back to him. But what if Mark didn't? Jennifer thought back over the past 2 years. She remembered countless conversations, moments of vulnerability. Mark, for all his weakness, hated his father's control. He felt suffocated by it. And in moments of frustration, often after a few drinks, he would talk. He'd complain about the pressure, about the shady corners of the Ashford empire he was expected to one day manage. A specific memory surfaced hazy at first, then sharpening into focus. It was about 6 months ago. Mark had come home late from a business trip to Switzerland, looking pale and stressed. He'd poured himself a large scotch and started venting about a deal his father was forcing through. "It's dirty, Jen." He'd slurred his guard completely down. "It's this thing he calls Project Nightingale. It's some offshore shell corporation scheme to bypass international sanctions on a new technology. It's brilliant and completely illegal. If it ever came out, it would ruin him. It would bring down the whole house of cards." At the time, she'd dismissed it as drunken paranoia. She'd put him to bed and forgotten about it. But now the words echoed in her mind. Project Nightingale. A house of cards. Could this be it? A secret so damaging it could give her leverage. It was a long shot. Mark had been drunk, possibly exaggerating. But it was a thread. "Chloe," Jennifer said, her voice electric with a new, dangerous energy, "I need you to do something for me. I need you to use your journalism skills and dig into something. It's called Project Nightingale." Chloe's eyes widened. "What is it?" I think it's the weakness in the foundation." While Chloe started digging, using her network of sources and her skills in navigating the dark corners of financial reporting, Jennifer focused on the other piece of the puzzle, Victoria Stratton. There was something about Victoria's performance at the wedding that felt off. The anger was real, certainly, but the announcement of her pregnancy felt theatrical, a perfectly timed bombshell designed for maximum impact. And Robert's complete lack of surprise suggested he knew it was coming. Was it possible it was all a lie, a performance they had orchestrated together? "Chloe, can you find out everything you can about Victoria Stratton?" Jennifer asked. "Social life, recent trips, friends. Look at her social media, her friends' accounts. Everything." Chloe, a master of the digital deep dive, got to work. 2 days later, she came back with a triumphant look on her face. Bingo. She turned her laptop around. On the screen was an Instagram photo from a friend of Victoria's posted just 10 days before the wedding. It was a picture of a group of women on a yacht in Miami celebrating a bachelorette party. In the center was Victoria Stratton, laughing, holding a bottle of champagne in one hand and a lit cigarette in the other. In another photo from the same day, she was doing tequila shots. This is 10 days before she stood in front of 300 people and claimed to be pregnant with Mark's baby. Chloe said, her voice grim. "Now, I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure chain smoking and doing tequila shots aren't on the recommended list for expectant mothers." Jennifer stared at the picture. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was a massive crack in Victoria's story. It was ammunition, a lie. A cruel, calculated lie they had used to destroy her. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Robert and Victoria had likely conspired. They had invented a pregnancy to manipulate Mark, to give him a valid reason to leave the unsuitable Jennifer. The public confrontation was designed to humiliate her so thoroughly that she would have no choice but to take the money and disappear. But they had underestimated her. They saw her as an emotional, weak woman. They didn't see the architect, the builder. They didn't realize that when you try to demolish a building, you have to be prepared for the architect to use the rubble to build something stronger in its place. That night, for the first time in a week, Jennifer picked up her phone. She scrolled through the dozens of pathetic texts from Mark and finally typed a reply. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk, not on the phone, face to face. Meet me at the first place we ever met. The construction site, tomorrow, 10 p.m. Come alone. If I see anyone from your father's security, I'm gone. This is your last chance, Mark. Your very last chance to decide who you are." She hit send. Now all she could do was wait and see if the weak, frightened boy she saw at the altar had any shred of the man she once loved left inside him. Her entire plan depended on it. The half-finished skyscraper loomed against the night sky, a skeleton of steel and concrete. It was their place, the place where it had all felt real and simple before the complexities of the Ashford billions had poisoned everything. Jennifer stood on the 20th floor, an open-air concrete slab that offered a breathtaking, wind-swept view of the city lights. She wore simple jeans and a dark jacket, a stark contrast to the memory of the wedding gown. She felt more herself here amongst the rebar and dust than she ever had in the Ashford mansion. She heard the whine of the construction elevator, and a moment later Mark stepped out onto the floor. He looked haggard. His expensive suit was rumpled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He stopped about 20 feet away from her, his hands shoved into his pockets, looking like a teenager called to the principal's office. "Jen," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for seeing me. I've been going out of my mind." "Have you?" Jennifer asked, her tone flat and cold. "Or has your father been keeping you busy?" He flinched. "This is not his fault." Jennifer let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Not his fault, Mark," he watched. "He stood there and watched as that woman assaulted me, and he did nothing. He knew she was coming. Don't you dare lie to me. Not anymore." Mark had the grace to look ashamed. He looked down at his feet. "I didn't know she was going to do that. I swear. I knew she was upset. My father, he said he would handle her. He said he'd make sure she didn't cause a scene." "He handled it all right," Jennifer retorted. "He aimed her like a missile and fired. He wanted to destroy me, to humiliate me so completely that you would have no choice but to come crawling back to him." "It's complicated," Mark mumbled, the pathetic catch-all excuse of a weak man. "No, it's not," Jennifer snapped, taking a step toward him. The wind whipped a strand of hair across her face. "It's simple. You have a choice. It's the same choice you had when you were standing on that altar. You can choose him, or you can choose me and your child. You failed the test once, Mark. This is your chance to retake it, but first you're going to tell me the truth. Everything." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Jen, I love you." "Don't." She cut him off. "Don't say that. Love is an action. It's what you do in the moment of crisis. What you did was nothing. Now talk. Start with Victoria." He finally broke. The story came tumbling out, a messy, shameful confession. Victoria Stratton was his ex-girlfriend from years ago, a relationship his father had always approved of. They had reconnected a few months back at a function. Mark, feeling smothered by his father's wedding planning, and Jennifer's growing unease had stupidly sought comfort in the familiar. It started as a drink, then a dinner. It became a mistake, a full-blown affair he was too cowardly to end. "I tried to break it off," he said, his voice cracking, "a few weeks before the wedding. I told her it was over, that I was in love with you and we were having a baby. She went crazy. She threatened to tell you everything. I panicked. I told my father." "Of course you did," Jennifer said, her voice dripping with contempt. "He told me not to worry." Mark continued, wringing his hands. "He said he would take care of it. He met with her. He told me she'd agreed to be discreet in exchange for a generous settlement. He looked me in the eye and promised me she wouldn't be at the wedding." Jennifer saw the whole chessboard now. Robert had never intended to pay Victoria for her silence. He'd paid her for her performance. He'd found the perfect weapon to detonate his son's life and rebuild it to his own specifications. "And the baby?" Jennifer asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is she pregnant?" Mark looked utterly lost. "She told me she was, right after I tried to break it off. That's when I really panicked. I didn't know what to do. A part of me... God, Jen, I'm so sorry. A part of me thought maybe my father was right, that everything would be easier if you just did what you were told." Jennifer finished for him. She pulled out her phone and walked toward him. She held it up, displaying the photo of Victoria on the yacht, drinking and smoking. "This was taken 10 days before our wedding," she said. "Does that look like a pregnant woman to you, Mark?" He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. The realization dawned on him, the depth of the manipulation, the scale of the lie he had been caught in. He looked from the phone to Jennifer's face, his expression crumbling from guilt into horror. "He played me," he whispered. "My own father. He used her. He lied to me." "He did what he always does," Jennifer said, her voice hard as steel. "He controlled the situation to get the outcome he wanted. The question is, are you going to let him keep doing it?" He sank onto a pile of construction materials, his head in his hands. "What can I do? He controls everything. My job, my trust fund, my whole life." "You can walk away," Jennifer said simply. "You can choose to be a man instead of his heir. You can choose to be a father to our child on our terms." She took a deep breath. It was time to play her final card. "Do you remember a night about 6 months ago?" she asked, her voice low and steady. "You came back from a trip. You were drunk and you were angry with your father. You told me about something called Project Nightingale." Mark's head shot up. The look on his face was no longer just horror. It was stark terror. "No," he breathed. "Jen, you can't. You don't know what you're talking about. That could destroy him. It could destroy everything." "I know," Jennifer said calmly. "He tried to destroy me. He tried to take my child. He declared war, Mark, not me. But I will not show up to a gunfight with a strongly worded letter. I will use any weapon I have to protect my baby." She knelt in front of him, forcing him to meet her gaze. Her eyes were not filled with hatred, but with a fierce, unwavering resolve. "This is the choice, Mark, right here, right now. There are 2 paths. On one path, you go back to him. You become his puppet, marry the woman he chooses, and you live in that gilded cage for the rest of your life. You'll see our child on weekends his lawyers deem appropriate, and you will always know you are a coward. Or," she continued, her voice softening slightly, "you can take the other path. With me. We walk away from all of it. The money, the name, everything. I have my career. You're smart. You can build something of your own, something clean. We'll have a life, a real one. It will be hard, but it will be ours, and we will raise our child together far away from that poison." She stood up, leaving the choice hanging in the air between them. The wind whistled through the steel beams of the unfinished building, a lonely, mournful sound. "He gave me an ultimatum," she said, turning to look out at the city. "Now I'm giving you one. You have until sunrise to decide. You can walk out of this building and go back to your father, or you can walk out of this building with me. But if you choose him, you need to understand this. I will not go quietly. I will use Project Nightingale. I will burn his kingdom to the ground to protect my child from him. I swear to God I will." She left him there alone in the dark, in the ruins of the building where their love had begun, with the impossible choice between a corrupt kingdom and an uncertain future. His decision would not only determine his own fate, but the outcome of the war Robert Ashford had so foolishly started. Jennifer didn't have to wait long. As the first light of dawn streaked the sky, her phone buzzed. It was Mark. "I'm downstairs. I made my choice." Her heart pounding, she looked out the window. Not his expensive sports car, but Mark himself stood on the pavement below holding a single duffel bag. He looked up and met her eyes, a clear, resolute expression on his face. He had chosen her. When she let him in, he stepped inside and dropped the bag. "I left my phone, my car, everything," he said, his voice steady. "They can't track me, but we can't just run, Jen. That would let him win. We have to end this face to face." He took her hand, his grip firm. "I need to do this. For us. For our baby." An hour later, they walked unannounced into Robert Ashford's penthouse office. He was standing by the window, a titan surveying his kingdom. He turned his face a mask of cold fury. "Mark, I am dispatching a team to find you." He began, his voice dangerously low. He then fixed his gaze on Jennifer. "And you. You have made a grave mistake." "No," Mark said, stepping in front of Jennifer, shielding her. "The mistake was spending my entire life being afraid of you. But that's over. I'm done." Robert let out a dry, humorless laugh. "A little rebellion. You would throw away your birthright, this empire, for her. This isn't an empire, it's a cage. And you didn't do it for me. You did it for yourselves." Mark's voice for the first time held no trace of fear. "You manipulated me. You used Victoria and a fake pregnancy to try and destroy the mother of your own grandchild. You are a monster." "I am a king," Robert thundered, his composure finally shattering. "I do what is necessary to protect the dynasty." "Then you can rule your kingdom alone," Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the rage. She took a step forward, her eyes locking with his. "Because if you ever try to interfere in our lives, if you so much as breathe in our direction, I will expose Project Nightingale to the world." The name hit Robert like a physical blow. The color drained from his face as he stared at her, then at the son who had clearly betrayed his darkest secret. The fight went out of him instantly. He wasn't a king. He was just a criminal who had been caught. He collapsed into his leather chair, a man utterly defeated, surrounded by a fortune that was now worthless. Mark walked to the vast mahogany desk and placed his company car keys, his wallet full of corporate cards and his office access badge, upon its polished surface. The gesture was quiet, final. "Goodbye, Dad," he said. He took Jennifer's hand, and together they walked out of the office, leaving Robert Ashford alone in his silent, gilded prison. As they stepped out of the tower and into the morning light, They had nothing but a duffel bag and each other. It wasn't the future they had planned, but for the first time, it was truly theirs. And that's where their story truly begins. Not with a storybook ending, but with the difficult, messy, and beautiful reality of starting over. Jennifer and Mark didn't get their perfect wedding, but they found something far more valuable, a chance at a real life free from the toxic control of a man who saw people as pawns. Their journey is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the money you have or the name you carry, but about the courage to walk away from a gilded cage and build your own future brick by brick. It's about choosing love and integrity over power and manipulation. What do you think? Was Jennifer right to use Project Nightingale as a weapon? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like Mark's? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And make sure you subscribe to the channel for more true-to-life stories that you won't forget. Thanks for listening.